Hi guys, I'm Dr. Molly. Today we're going to be looking at a GI MAPS test by Diagnostic Solutions. This is my functional in-depth test to look at your gut health. More and more today we look at our gut function and gut health as being super foundational to overall wellness, to preventing chronic disease and all of that good stuff. So this is a super valuable test, and I wanted to just share what a sample report would look like for you guys. So we'll start by looking at this first page. So the first page goes through our more known pathogens, more dangerous pathogens. So these are our more intense infections. So if we look here, some of them might sound a bit familiar to some of you. So C. difficile, E. coli, Salmonella, those are some bacteria infections that people have heard of. When we look at our parasitic pathogens, Giardia stands out for a lot of people. And then our viral pathogens, norovirus, right here, that is like our typical infection when we say we have the stomach flu. So that's the first page. The second page starts by looking at H. pylori panel. H. pylori is an infection that is associated with gastric ulcers, so stomach ulcers, gastric cancers. So knowing if this is high in your gut microbiome is pretty important to preventing some of those more serious chronic diseases. This panel is also nice because it shows any virulence factors that the infection might have. So these I explain to people as kind of like the bacteria's superpowers. So if H. pylori has any of these superpowers, that's going to make it a bit more dangerous. In this sample report, you can see this person has 4 virulence factors present, and so this is definitely an H. pylori patient that likely has some symptoms and one that would benefit greatly from treating the H. pylori. There is some research that says, up to 50% of our population could have a low amount of H. pylori present in their gut microbiome, and this could be normal for them, not really cause them any problems. And so looking at this test result and taking into consideration the patient's symptoms, family history, virulence factors present, and then definitely looking at this level of infection is going to all play roles in deciding how aggressively we treat your condition if you have H. pylori. Some symptoms of H. pylori are going to be heartburn, bloating, difficulty with digestion, maybe some GERD-like symptoms. You may have been prescribed a PPI to try to treat that. It might be helping, might not be helping. Chronic infections of H. pylori can also deplete magnesium levels. It can lower our stomach acid, which is going to in turn result in a lot more dysbiosis. So that's all stuff that, plays into our decision of, again, how aggressively we're going to treat. Then we look at normal bacteria, Flora. So these are the bacteria that we want in your gut. We want them to be diverse. We want them to be plentiful. We basically want your gut microbiome like a really cool rainforest that has a lot of foliage in it and is really green and all of that good stuff. So we look at one overall number of bacteria. So are we seeing these all be upper range of normal, lower range of normal? Are they high? Are they low, etc.? We look at the phyla. Specifically, this ratio allows us to really tailor in on which probiotic is going to be best for your gut microbiome. What good bacteria do you need in there? So as most of you probably know, different probiotic supplements have different strains of bacteria in them, and different strains have different research as to their benefits. But basically, we look at this and try to supplement you with a probiotic that's going to most diversify your gut microbiome if needed. The third page is really cool. This looks at your opportunistic bacteria. So these are bacteria that we can have in a normal gut microbiome, but if they are seen in high levels, that is an indicator that they have kind of overgrown, and they're going to overgrow and cause problems if we have some kind of dysbiosis present that's allowing our bad bacteria to kind of overgrow. So if you have really low levels of your good bacteria, or a gut infection, or H. pylori, or low stomach acid, etc., we can see these opportunistic bacteria start to overgrow. This is also broken down into a potential autoimmune trigger panel. So these are so cool. If you have any history of autoimmune in your family, any like present autoimmune conditions in your own personal medical history, this is really cool. So there's literature to support that different ones of these bacteria are associated with various autoimmune conditions. So we think rheumatoid arthritis with Prevotella proteus. We think Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid conditions, with Prevotella. We look at Klebsiella as possibly a trigger for ankylosing spondylosis, which is a rheumatoid condition. And yeah, so all these have some good solid literature to support that we could see a correlation there in preventing or helping to treat autoimmune disease. So that's a really cool panel to look at. The fungi yeast panel, people like this one. Candida's talked about a lot. A lot of people have Candida infections. Candida can present with really random rashes, really hard to treat rashes, possibly a lot of sugar cravings. They feed off of like sugar, and so you'll constantly be craving sugar and carbs and all that stuff. You can get really bad acne with Candida. We can sometimes see more bacterial vaginosis or UTIs present with Candida infections. And then we look into our viruses. We see CMV, which is cytomegalovirus, and Epstein-Barr virus. So Epstein-Barr virus is the virus that is associated with mono or kissing disease. The way viruses work is usually we don't necessarily clear them from our body, but our immune system fights them well enough to kind of put them in their room. So they go dormant in various places in our body. And so there's some literature that suggests that EBV, the monovirus, will actually go dormant in our gut cells. And so some people who have had mono in their past and then all of a sudden are getting all these chronic gut issues, that's something that kind of is worth investigating, and that correlation isn't always presented to you. So this test is really cool to look at that, if that could be your root cause. Then it goes into the parasites panel. This looks at worms. People are always freaked out by this section, and oh, I hope I don't have any worms. And I haven't seen a lot of worms detected, but if you have them, let's identify them and let's treat them and get rid of them. They can cause, weight issues, nutrient depletions, discomfort, and all of that stuff. So we want to take care of our worms. This protozoa, Blastocystis hominis, this one's so cool to me. Blastocystis is actually on the rise. We're seeing it a lot more frequently and in younger patients even, so like 10 years old. So blasto, the way it plays with some processes in our body, it actually alters our progesterone receptors and can affect our histamine response, which is that like allergic response that happens in our body. And so sometimes kind of key clues to blasto is someone who might have some gut symptoms, might not, but someone who's getting random hives, random like allergies, maybe all of a sudden have like really stuffy sinuses or runny nose. And then premenstrual migraines can sometimes be a sign that you might have an overgrowth of Blastocystis hominis in your system. So that can usually be naturally treated, and as many of these can. And then, okay, the last section is the intestinal health. This is so cool, so useful. Everyone should get this done. The first little bit, the digestion one. So that's kind of telling us how well are you digesting your foods? Do you have enough stomach acid? Is your gallbladder functioning appropriately? So we can kind of piece together some things using those two measurements. And then GI markers. So another one of my favorite things to look at is beta-glucuronidase. Beta-glucuronidase is part of phase 3 detox of estrogen. And so if beta-glucuronidase is too high in our gut, we'll actually see symptoms of like estrogen dominance, which can look like a lot worse PMS symptoms, maybe some bloating, breast tenderness, GI upset around your period, more loose stools, all of those kind of things. So that's really cool to look at. And then it looks for occult blood, which is just any blood in your stool. We definitely don't want to see that too high. If it is, good to know. Let's investigate what's causing it. And then it looks at our immune response. So secretory IgA is our main immunoglobulin in our gut, in our mucous membranes. And so On this test, it kind of shows us, is our immune system robust? So one, are we able to mount a immune response if needed in the gut? And then it also looks at anti-gliadin IgA, which is, that marker of maybe celiac disease, gluten sensitivities. This is kind of interesting to run on my patient population. A lot of my patients are gluten-free, and sometimes we run this and we see this marker high, which in theory, if you are avoiding gluten 100%, this is going to be low. So when we see this high in my gluten avoidant people, that clues us in that, okay, one, there's probably a hidden source of gluten somewhere in your diet. Let's figure out where that's at, and maybe taking care of that's going to solve your problems. Maybe there's more to it, but definitely a cool piece of the puzzle to investigate. It looks at a marker called calprotectin, which is a local inflammatory marker. This is actually used to monitor treatments in IBD patients, so that Crohn's ulcerative colitis patient. We definitely want this low. We don't want local inflammation. We know chronic inflammation is a huge driver of chronic disease, so if we can dial in on that, make sure that's low, awesome. And then the last part of this test is an optional add-on test of Zon Yulin. Zon Yulin is a marker of leaky gut. So if Zon Yulin's high, that's telling us that your gut cells are kind of allowing in larger proteins, more toxins into our systemic system than we'd like. We want it to be all tight, and we only want to let in good things. So that tells us that. Things like chronic antibiotic use, birth control use, a lot of stress, anxiety can increase Zon Yulin. And then kind of a separate but included part of this panel is looking at this antibiotic resistance genes and phenotypes. So this really is important if you have any of those infections on that first page. So this one, all these infections, these are ones that we maybe want to consider using some conventional treatment alongside our naturopathic treatments. And so this page is beneficial to your primary care or prescribing doctor who's going to be maybe helping with that antibiotic prescription. This will actually tell them which antibiotic is going to best address the infection you have. So some of you might have heard about like antibiotic resistance. This actually looks at the genes on your specific infection and tells us if one antibiotic is going to work more than the other one. Yeah, so that's that, you guys. That's the GI MAPS test. Super valuable, super helpful. Definitely a great place to start if you're, worried about any kind of chronic disease, if you're having any gut symptoms, if you're having any weird, muscle pains, joint pains, weird skin rashes that just you can't really put a finger on what's causing it. This can be a really, really critical place to start. So yeah, if you have any questions or you want to look into running this test, please reach out. I love helping people with this, and have a good day.